Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone ignores. A young black man walked into a Tesla dealership wearing sneakers and a hoodie, and the salesman assumed he was nobody. The assumption would cost him everything. What happened next left 50 customers watching in stunned silence as the tables turned in the most unexpected way. The glass doors of Tesla Austin swooshed open at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, letting in the humid Texas heat along with a young black man in his late 20s. Jaden Williams stepped onto the polished concrete floor, his white Air Jordans squeaking softly against the surface. The showroom buzzed with the quiet energy of potential buyers examining sleek electric vehicles under bright LED lights. A Hispanic family debated features on a Model Y, while their twin boys pressed their faces against the windows of a red Model S. Near the back, a middle-aged white couple in business attire discussed financing options with a salesman in a crisp blue shirt. Jaden moved through the space like he wasn't there. He approached the information kiosk, picked up a brochure for the Model X, and studied the specifications. His eyes lingered on the falcon wing doors section. A salesman walked past him twice, clipboard in hand, making eye contact with other customers, but somehow missing Jaden entirely. When Jaden raised his hand to get the man's attention, the salesman turned toward a woman in designer jeans instead. "Excuse me," Jaden said to another salesman, a heavy-set white man with a name tag reading Brian. Brian looked up from his phone, his expression shifting from boredom to barely concealed annoyance. "Yeah," he said, not moving from behind his desk. "I was wondering if I could take a look at the Model X over there." Brian's eyes swept over Jaden's outfit, the gray Nike hoodie, dark jeans, and sneakers. "That's a $120,000 vehicle, man. You sure you're in the right place?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Jaden felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he'd had walking into his first Harvard Business School class 12 years ago. He kept his voice level. "Yes, I'm sure." Brian sighed dramatically and stood up, his chair wheels scraping against the floor. "Look, we get a lot of people just wanting to sit in the cars for Instagram photos. These aren't toys." Around them, other conversations continued, but Jaden noticed a few heads turning their way. Jaden pulled out his worn leather wallet, the same one his grandmother had given him for his 18th birthday. It was scratched and faded, held together with electrical tape on one corner. "I have my license and credit cards if you need to see them," he said quietly. Brian glanced at the wallet and smirked. "Dude, that thing looks like it's been through a washing machine. You sure there's actually money in there?" A woman at the nearby display giggled. Jaden closed the wallet slowly, his fingers tracing the electrical tape. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory. "Baby, it's not what's on the outside that matters." Brian shrugged and started walking toward the Model X, his pace deliberately slow. "Come on then, but make it quick. I've got real customers coming in." He gestured dismissively at the vehicle. "This is the Model X Plaid, 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds, seating for 7. Like I said, $120,000 base price, probably $140,000 with options." He didn't open the doors or invite Jaden to look inside. Instead, he stood with his arms crossed, checking his Apple Watch. "Any questions?" The tone suggested he hoped there wouldn't be any. A young Latina woman in a Tesla polo shirt approached them. Her name tag read, Sophia. She smiled genuinely at Jaden. "Hi there, I'm Sophia. Is there anything specific about the Model X you'd like to know about?" Brian rolled his eyes. "I got this one, Sophia. Thanks." But Sophia lingered, sensing tension. "Actually," she said to Jaden, "would you like to see the interior? The falcon wings are pretty amazing." Brian stepped between them. "Sophia, don't you have paperwork to finish?" Her smile faded, but she nodded and walked away, glancing back at Jaden with an apologetic look. Jaden watched Sophia retreat, then turned back to Brian. Something shifted in his posture, not defeat, but a quiet resolve. "You know what?" he said, his voice steady. "I think I'll come back another time." Brian's grin widened. Yeah, probably a good idea. Maybe save up a little more first." As Jaden turned to leave, Brian called out loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "Hey, there's a used car lot about 2 miles down the road. Might be more in your price range." A few people chuckled. Jaden paused at the door, his hand on the handle, but didn't turn around. The parking lot felt like an oven after the air-conditioned showroom. Jaden walked to his car, a modest 2018 Honda Civic with a small dent in the rear bumper. He sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, watching customers come and go through the Tesla showroom's glass walls. Through the windows, he could see Brian back at his desk, probably telling the story to his colleagues. Jaden reached into his console and pulled out his iPhone, scrolling to a contact labeled Marcus-Legal. His thumb hovered over the call button. Not yet, he thought, but soon. The next morning, Jaden returned to the Tesla dealership at exactly 10 a.m. This time, he wore the same clothes but carried a different energy. He walked directly to Sophia, who was arranging brochures at the information station. "Hi, Sophia," he said. "I'm Jaden. We met yesterday." She looked up and smiled, but her expression was cautious. "Oh, hi. Yes, I remember. Are you here to look at the Model X again?" Her eyes darted toward Brian's desk, where he was talking on the phone. "Actually," Jaden said, "I was hoping to speak with your manager." Sophia's face tightened with concern. "Is everything okay? Did something happen yesterday?" Jaden could see her genuine worry, and it touched something in him. Here was someone who actually cared about doing right by customers. "Everything's fine," he assured her. "I just have some questions about your financing options for the Model X Plaid." She brightened. "Of course. Let me get Mr. Peterson for you. He's our sales manager." As she walked toward the back office, Jaden noticed Brian glance up from his call, his expression shifting to confusion when he spotted Jaden again. Inside his own head, Jaden battled familiar demons. "You don't deserve this attention," a voice whispered. "You're just a kid from the South Side who got lucky with a scholarship. They're going to figure out you don't belong here." He shook his head slightly, dispelling the thoughts. His phone buzzed with a text from his investment advisor. "Q3 returns looking strong. Your portfolio is up 23% this year." The irony wasn't lost on him. On paper, he was worth more than most of the cars in this showroom, but in here, he was invisible. Brian finished his call and walked over, his expression skeptical. "Back again, huh? I thought I explained yesterday that these cars are pretty expensive." His voice carried that same patronizing tone, but now there was an edge of irritation. "Look, man, I don't want to be rude, but we've got actual buyers coming in today. If you're not serious about purchasing—" "I am serious," Jaden interrupted quietly. "That's why I asked to speak with your manager." Brian laughed. "Dude, Mr. Peterson isn't going to tell you anything different than what I told you yesterday. A car loan for $120,000 requires serious income verification." Mr. Peterson emerged from the back office, a tall, thin man in his 50s with graying temples and a tired expression. Sophia had clearly briefed him because he approached with professional courtesy, though Jaden caught him glancing at his clothes. "Mr. Williams, I understand you're interested in the Model X?" His tone was neutral, neither welcoming nor dismissive. "Yes, sir," Jaden replied. "I'd like to discuss financing options." Peterson nodded. "Of course. Do you mind if I ask what you do for work?" The question felt loaded, and Jaden knew his answer would determine how the rest of this conversation went. "I work in technology," Jaden said, which was technically true. Peterson's expression remained neutral. "And your annual income?" Brian hovered nearby, clearly listening. Jaden hesitated. The real answer was complicated. His income varied wildly depending on which investments paid out, which startups he sold, which consulting contracts he took. Last year, it had been just over $2 million. This year, it might be more. "It varies," he said finally, "but I can provide documentation." Peterson glanced at Brian, who smirked. "Mr. Williams, the Model X Plaid requires approval for significant financing without steady, verifiable income." He let the sentence hang. Jaden thought about his grandmother again, how she'd worked 3 jobs to keep him in school. She'd never owned a new car in her life, riding the bus until she was 73. "When I was 8, he said suddenly, "my grandmother told me that respect isn't something you buy. You earn it by how you treat people." Peterson looked puzzled by the non sequitur. Brian rolled his eyes. "Look, man, that's real nice, but this is a business. We need to see pay stubs, tax returns, bank statements. That's just how it works." The words felt like a door closing, but Jaden noticed Sophia watching from across the showroom, her expression sympathetic. A well-dressed couple entered the showroom, and Brian immediately straightened up. "Mr. Peterson, the Johnsons are here for their 11 o'clock appointment." Peterson nodded and turned back to Jaden. Mr. Williams, why don't you take some time to gather your financial documents, and we can revisit this conversation? It was a polite dismissal. Jaden nodded slowly. I understand. But as he turned to leave, he paused. Can I ask you something? What made you want to work for Tesla? Peterson seemed caught off guard by the question. I believe in the mission, sustainable transportation, changing the world. Jaden smiled. That's exactly why I want to drive one. The next day, Jaden called in a favor. His friend Marcus worked for one of Austin's top law firms, specializing in corporate acquisitions. I need you to make some calls, Jaden told him over lunch at Franklin Barbecue. Find out who owns the Tesla dealership on South Lamar. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Planning to buy a car or buy the dealership? Jaden didn't smile. Maybe both. An hour later, Marcus called with information. It's a franchise owned by Austin Premium Auto Group. Family business, been around for 20 years. The owner is David Chen. Want me to reach out? Jaden thought about Brian's smirk, Peterson's dismissal, Sophia's apologetic glance. Set up a meeting. David Chen had kind eyes and a firm handshake. His office walls displayed photos of him with various civic leaders and a framed $1 bill from when he opened his first dealership in 1998. Marcus tells me you're interested in our Tesla franchise, Chen said, settling behind his desk. It's doing well, but I'm getting close to retirement age. My kids aren't interested in the car business. Jaden leaned forward. I've been thinking about diversifying my investments. Automotive retail seems like a stable sector. Chen laughed. Stable? Have you met car salesmen? They're like herd cats. But his expression grew serious. What's your background? For the next hour, Jaden walked Chen through his portfolio, his education, his vision for customer service excellence. Chen listened intently, occasionally asking probing questions. Finally, he sat back in his chair. You know, I've been looking for someone who understands both business and technology. Tesla isn't just about selling cars anymore, it's about selling a future. He paused. But I have to ask, why this dealership specifically? There are other Tesla franchises available, probably at better locations. Jaden chose his words carefully. I visited your showroom recently. I think there's room for improvement in how customers are treated. Chen's expression darkened slightly. What kind of improvement? Jaden described his experience without naming Brian specifically, focusing on the broader issues of customer service and unconscious bias. Chen listened with growing concern. This is exactly the kind of thing that worries me about leaving the business to someone else, he said finally. My reputation is tied to how customers are treated in that showroom. He stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the Austin skyline. Mr. Williams, I'm going to make you an offer. But first, I want you to visit the dealership one more time. Observe, take notes. If you still want to buy after that, we'll talk numbers. That Friday, Jaden returned to the Tesla showroom for what he planned to be his final visit as a customer. This time, he brought back up his cousin Derek, a software engineer who looked every bit the tech worker stereotype in his startup t-shirt and designer glasses. They walked in together, Derek immediately drawing attention from multiple salespeople. Good morning, called out a salesman Jaden hadn't seen before. Looking at the Model S today? Derek smiled. Actually, my cousin here is the one shopping. I'm just moral support. The salesman's eyes shifted to Jaden, and the familiar look of disappointment crossed his face. Oh, okay. Brian spotted them from across the showroom and sauntered over. Hey, it's you again. Third time's the charm, right? His tone was joking, but there was an edge of annoyance. Derek, who had been briefed on the previous encounters, stepped forward. Actually, we're here because Jaden is ready to make a purchase. He just needed to get his financing in order. Brian's expression shifted to skepticism. Yeah? And what kind of financing are we talking about? Jaden pulled out an envelope from his jacket pocket. I have a pre-approval letter from Wells Fargo. For the full purchase price, cash equivalent. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Brian took the letter, his cocky expression faltering as he read. The pre-approval was real. Marcus had helped him obtain it using a portion of his investment portfolio as collateral. This is for $150,000, Brian said slowly. Yeah, Derek chimed in. Jay wanted to make sure he could get whatever options he wanted. Other salespeople began to take notice. Sophia approached with a genuine smile. "Mr. Williams, you're back. Did you decide on the Model X?" But Brian quickly stepped between them. "Actually, Sophia, I've been working with this customer. I'll handle the transaction." The next 30 minutes were surreal. Brian's entire demeanor transformed as he walked Jaden through the Model X's features with newfound enthusiasm. "The air suspension is incredible," he gushed, opening the Falcon Wing doors with theatrical flair. "And the acceleration, you've really got to experience it to believe it." Other customers stopped their own shopping to watch the demonstration. Peterson emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. When he saw the pre-approval letter, his eyebrows shot up. "Mr. Williams, I have to apologize for our earlier conversation. If I had known—" Jaden let him trail off. The apology felt hollow. But something was bothering Jaden beyond Brian's sudden change in attitude. He watched how the salesman interacted with other customers, professional with the well-dressed ones, dismissive with anyone who looked like they might be browsing. An elderly Hispanic man in work clothes was ignored for 15 minutes while salespeople chatted among themselves. A young black woman with a toddler was handed a brochure and told all the information is in there when she asked about charging stations. Jaden realized this wasn't just about him. It was about a culture that judged customers before knowing anything about them. As Brian filled out paperwork, he kept up a steady stream of chatter. "You know, I had a feeling about you from the start. I told Sophia just yesterday that you seemed like a serious buyer." The lie was so blatant that Jaden almost laughed. Derek caught his eye and shook his head slightly, a warning not to call Brian out. "Not yet." "Actually," Jaden said, "I've been thinking. This is a big purchase. Maybe I should sleep on it one more night." Brian's face went pale. But you have the pre-approval. The car's right here. We can have you driving it today." The desperation in his voice was unmistakable. Jaden stood up from the desk, Derek following his lead. "I appreciate all your help, Brian, really. But like my grandmother used to say, big decisions require big thoughts." He extended his hand for a shake. Brian took it, his palm slightly sweaty. Of course, but maybe I could call you tomorrow, just to see if you have any questions." Jaden nodded noncommittally. As they walked toward the exit, he could feel Brian's eyes following them. Other staff members looked confused. A six-figure sale had just walked out the door, and their colleagues seemed panicked rather than confident it would return. Outside in the parking lot, Derek burst into laughter. "Dude, that was beautiful. Did you see his face when you stood up to leave? I thought he was going to pass out." But Jaden wasn't laughing. "It's not funny, Derek. That guy treats people like garbage until he thinks they have money. Then he becomes their best friend." Derek's expression sobered. "So what's the plan? You're not actually going to buy from them, are you?" Jaden looked back at the showroom, where he could see Brian pacing behind the glass. "Actually, I'm going to buy from them, but not as a customer." Monday morning, Jaden met David Chen at a coffee shop near the dealership. Chen arrived with a folder full of documents and a serious expression. "I did some investigating after our conversation," he said without preamble. "Talked to some customers, looked at some complaints. You were right about the customer service issues." He pulled out several printed emails. "These are from the past 6 months, all involving the same salesman." Jaden didn't need to ask which one. "What are you going to do about it?" Chen sighed. "That's the problem with being an absentee owner. These things happen when you're not watching. It's one of the reasons I want to sell." Chen slid a purchase agreement across the table. "Here's my offer. Fair market value for the franchise, plus inventory. You'll need to keep the existing staff for 90 days. Union contract, but after that you can make whatever changes you think are necessary." Jaden scanned the numbers. It was more than he'd expected to pay, but still well within his means. "There's one condition," he said. "I want to handle this transition personally. No announcement to staff until I'm ready." Chen nodded. "Your business to run however you want. When do you want to take ownership?" Jaden thought about Brian's dismissive attitude, Peterson's hollow apology, Sophia's genuine kindness. This Friday. The paperwork took 3 days to finalize. Lawyers, accountants, insurance agents, a parade of professionals making sure every detail was correct. Meanwhile, Jaden visited the dealership twice more, ostensibly as a customer still thinking about his purchase. Each visit reinforced his observations about the toxic culture Brian had created. The man wasn't just rude to customers he deemed unworthy, he was dismissive to newer staff members, condescending to the service department, and generally poisonous to the entire atmosphere. Other employees seemed to walk on eggshells around him. Friday morning, Jaden arrived at the dealership at 8 a.m., 30 minutes before opening. He wore a navy blue suit, white shirt, and red tie, the same outfit he'd worn to his Harvard Business School graduation. David Chen met him in the parking lot with the keys and a nervous smile. "You sure about this?" Chen asked. "Once those doors open, it's all yours." Jaden pocketed the keys and shook Chen's hand. "I've never been more sure of anything." As Chen drove away, Jaden stood alone in front of his dealership, watching the staff arrive for work through the glass doors. They had no idea their world was about to change. At exactly 8:30, Jaden walked through the front doors of Tesla Austin as its new owner. The morning rush hadn't started yet, just staff preparing for the day. Sophia was arranging brochures at the information station. Peterson was in his office, probably reviewing yesterday's sales numbers. Brian stood near the Model S display, checking his phone. None of them noticed Jaden enter. He walked to the center of the showroom and cleared his throat. "Excuse me, everyone. Could I have your attention for a moment?" The casual tone made several heads turn, but without real urgency. They saw the same young black man who'd been bothering them all week. Brian looked up from his phone with obvious irritation. "Seriously, dude? We're not even open yet. You need to wait outside until 9. A few other staff members chuckled nervously. Jaden smiled and pulled out his phone, speed dialing a number. "Hi, Marcus? Yeah, I'm here. Send them in." Through the glass doors, everyone could see a black sedan pulling into the parking lot. 3 people in business suits got out, Marcus and 2 other lawyers. "What the hell?" Brian muttered. Peterson emerged from his office, sensing something was wrong. "Mr. Williams, what's going on here?" The lawyers entered the showroom, and Marcus approached with a professional smile. "Good morning, everyone," Marcus announced to the confused staff. "I'm Marcus Rodriguez from Henderson, Burke & Associates. I'm here to facilitate a transition of ownership for this dealership." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Peterson's face went white. "Transition of ownership? What are you talking about? Mr. Chen didn't say anything about—" "Mr. Chen completed the sale yesterday," Marcus interrupted. "Effective immediately, this Tesla franchise is under new ownership." Every eye in the room turned to Jaden, who stood quietly in the center of the showroom, his hands clasped behind his back. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Brian was the first to find his voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. You bought this place?" Jaden nodded slowly. "I did." Brian's phone slipped from his hand and clattered on the concrete floor. Peterson stared in disbelief. But you're—" He stopped himself before finishing the sentence, but everyone knew what he was thinking. Sophia was the only one who smiled, though she looked as stunned as everyone else. "Mr. Williams," she said, "you're really the new owner?" "I am," Jaden confirmed, "and I have some changes to make." The next few minutes were chaos. Peterson immediately went into damage control mode, approaching Jaden with outstretched hand and an obsequious smile. "Mr. Williams, I want to personally apologize for any misunderstandings we may have had. I hope we can start fresh." Brian stood frozen by the Model S, his face cycling through expressions of shock, fear, and something approaching panic. Other staff members whispered among themselves, trying to process what was happening. Marcus and his colleagues set up a table near the information station, spreading out documents and laptops. The transformation from car dealership to corporate boardroom was surreal. Jaden walked slowly through the showroom, his footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. He stopped in front of the Model X he'd wanted to examine just a week ago, the same car Brian had dismissed him from viewing. "You know," he said to no one in particular, "I really did just want to buy a car." His voice carried easily through the space. "I had the money. I had the credit. I just wanted to be treated like a human being." He turned to face the assembled staff. "Some of you did that. Some of you didn't." His eyes found Sophia, then moved to Peterson, and finally settled on Brian. "I think you all know which category you fall into." Brian finally found the courage to approach, his earlier cockiness replaced by desperate pleading. "Look, man, I'm sorry about before. Really, I was having a bad day and I took it out on you. That's not who I am." Jaden studied him for a long moment. "Actually, Brian, I think that's exactly who you are. I've been watching you all week. How you treat customers, how you talk to Sophia, how you act when you think no one important is looking." Brian's face crumpled. "Please, I've got a mortgage, kids. I can't lose this job." The plea hung in the air, and for a moment, everyone seemed to hold their breath. "You should have thought about that," Jaden said quietly, "before you decided some customers were worth less than others." "You're fired, Brian." The words were spoken calmly, without anger or satisfaction. Brian's knees actually buckled and he grabbed the Model S for support. "You can't. There are procedures, union contracts." Marcus looked up from his documents. "Mr. Anderson, you were terminated for cause. The documentation is all here. Customer complaints, discrimination issues, hostile work environment. The union won't protect you from this." Peterson stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "Mr. Williams, I take full responsibility for any problems with staff performance. Brian works for me, and if there were issues, I should have addressed them." Jaden appreciated the gesture, but shook his head. "This isn't about management oversight, Mr. Peterson. This is about character." The morning customers began arriving at 9 a.m. sharp, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. Marcus and his team discreetly packed up their documents while regular business resumed around them. Jaden watched from near the service desk as Sophia helped a young couple explore the Model 3 display. Her approach was patient, informative, never pushy. When the couple mentioned they needed to check with their bank about financing, she smiled and said, "Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." No judgment, no dismissal, just genuine service. This, Jaden thought, was how it should be done. Peterson approached him cautiously. "Mr. Williams, I know this is a difficult transition, but I hope you'll consider keeping me on. I've learned a lot today about how we need to do things differently." Jaden studied the older man's face, seeing genuine remorse rather than just fear. "Mr. Peterson, I'm not looking to fire everyone. I'm looking to build a culture where every customer feels welcome. Can you help me do that?" Peterson nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. In fact, I've got some ideas about training programs, customer service protocols." "Good," Jaden interrupted. "Start with making sure everyone understands that we judge customers by their character, not their clothes." By noon, word had spread among the staff that the transition was more evolution than revolution. Jaden made it clear that good employees had nothing to fear. In fact, they might find new opportunities in his vision for the dealership. Sophia was promoted to sales manager on the spot, a decision that earned applause from her colleagues. The toxic atmosphere that Brian had created began to dissipate almost immediately, replaced by a sense of nervous optimism. Customers seemed to sense the change, too. Conversations were more relaxed, laughter echoed through the showroom, and several people commented on the friendly atmosphere. Around 2 p.m., Jaden finally walked over to the Model X he'd wanted to see a week ago. This time, he opened the Falcon Wing doors himself, sat in the driver's seat, and adjusted the mirrors. The car still cost $120,000. It still had the same features, the same acceleration, the same environmental benefits, but everything else had changed. Sophia approached with a genuine smile. "So, Mr. Williams, are you finally ready to take this one for a test drive?" Jaden looked at her through the windshield and grinned. "Actually, Sophia, I think I'll take the red one instead. This one has too many memories attached to it." As the day wound down, Jaden found himself thinking about his grandmother again. She'd passed away 5 years ago, never knowing about his business success or the wealth he'd accumulated. But he could imagine her voice, proud but not surprised. "Baby, I always knew you were special. Not because of what you had, but because of who you are." He pulled out his worn leather wallet, still held together with electrical tape, and ran his fingers over its familiar surface. Some things, he decided, were worth keeping exactly as they were. They reminded you where you came from and why the journey mattered. The last customer of the day was an elderly Hispanic man in work clothes, the same one Jaden had seen ignored earlier in the week. This time, Sophia approached him immediately with a warm smile and a genuine offer to help. As Jaden watched the interaction unfold, he realized this was what success actually looked like. Not the money in his bank account or the deed to a business, but the moment when respect became the default rather than something you had to earn. The man left 20 minutes later with a brochure, a business card, and most importantly, his dignity intact. That evening, Jaden stood alone in his new dealership as the last of the staff headed home. The showroom lights reflected off the polished concrete floor, and the Tesla vehicles gleamed under the LED fixtures. Through the glass walls, he could see Austin's skyline in the distance, the city where he'd built his fortune and now his future. His phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "So, how does it feel to be a car dealer?" Jaden typed back, "Like coming home." And for the first time in a long time, that was exactly what it felt like. The next morning, Jaden arrived early again, but this time as the owner rather than a customer in disguise. Sophia was already there, arranging the information station with obvious pride in her new role. "Good morning, Mr. Williams," she called out cheerfully. "Ready for day 2? He smiled and looked around the showroom. His showroom where the morning sun streamed through the glass walls, illuminating possibilities he was just beginning to imagine. "You know what, Sophia? I don't think I've ever been more ready for anything in my life." "Some things," he said to himself, echoing his grandmother's wisdom, "are worth fighting for."